Hi, friends. It's your pal Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we're going to talk about understanding the the player character sheet, and the player character as an emotional vessel. All right, let's get into this. So, actually, let's define it as the player character because, oh, yeah. Okay. Wow. I thank you guys for listening to a single video I've ever done on Dungeons and Dragons because by talking through my thoughts with you, I it opens my mind to what really is happening. All right. So, let's talk about the player character sheet as an emotional talisman and the player character as an emotional vessel. Okay? All right. Let's jump into this. So, first of all, why are we talking about the player character as an emotional vessel? Because of the emotional revolution. Now, if you don't know what that term is, I'm going to define it briefly. But if you want a full definition, you could go into, just look at the link below. You'll see channel specific playlist, and there you'll see the emotional revolution definition. Okay? But I'll define it briefly here. So B. Dave Walters is the second best dungeon master in the world, and he is completely redefining the goals of Dungeons and Dragons. For the first 50 years, the goal, in my humble opinion, for the first 50 years, the goal of Dungeons and Dragons was if everyone at the table is having fun, you're doing it right. Now, this was a terrible goal because it demanded that everyone at the table have the same goal. It also demanded that everyone at the table had the same experience, and that's pretty horrible. That's that like if you hold a party, right? Do you want everybody to have the same experience? No. Like one person could sit quietly talking with someone, and they might unearth a social truth with someone who has more wisdom than it. Somebody might dance, right? Like somebody might get pranked and they're frightened. Like there's going to be different emotions, right, and different things that happen, right? So B. Dave Walters came and he did this interview, and it was an interview it was an interview that discussed Dungeons and Dragons in a Castle, and he's one of the top dungeon masters at Dungeons and Dragons in a Castle, and he said the following. He said, um, what did he say about that? He said three things. Actually, two things. Let's get into it. He said, "I am here." He was describing the way he dungeon masters. He said, "I'm here to evoke an emotion. To if someone at the table is feeling something, it's a success." So this completely changes, right? This is like saying, "I'm going to evoke an emotion, and it doesn't have to be fun. It doesn't have to be laughter, right? It doesn't have to be joy. It could be anything, right?" Then then it goes further and it's saying it doesn't matter if everyone feels something at the table, just one. I just need to have one person at the table feel something real. That's huge. That is a massive change, right? And yeah, and then on top of that, then that immediately opened the question of, well, wait, how far are you going evoking emotion? And he defined it. He later said, uh, it's cathartic. You just get it out. You get it out. Do you know what catharsis is? Psychological relief from strong emotion. So he's saying the purpose, in my humble opinion, B. Dave Walters has started the emotional revolution. He's saying I I believe what he's actually saying is let's abandon fun and move into the space where the point is to feel something real at the table, right? And that can reach the point of psychological relief. That's astounding. That is a complete redefinition of the goals of Dungeons and Dragons, in my humble opinion. And this isn't from some scrub or somebody who's running some OSR or indie game. This is one of the top Dungeons and Dragons and Dungeon Masters in the world. Actually, I would say number two. Right? Matthew Mercer is number one. Let's not get it twisted. All right. So if what he's saying is true, this completely redefines the relationship between the player and the player character. Okay? So what is the player character now? They are an emotional vessel and shield and an emotional shield. Okay? So let's get into that. All right. So what do I mean by an emotional vessel? Well, we as human beings have limitations on what emotions we can experience. Okay? So first of all, I would say it's unlikely I've ever truly experienced horror, right? And the reason why is I've lived a pretty, I guess I have once. I have experienced horror once, but I live a very privileged life. I live a privileged life, right? And that means I can only count on one hand the number of times I've ever experienced horror, right? The other thing is we have limitations in our schedule, in our duties, in our obligations. And so we're not allowed to just feel everything we want all the time, right? But if you're in Dungeons and Dragons, you could go to the table and you could seek to be evoked for a specific emotion. If you have a dungeon master like B. Dave Walters, right? You can go about the work of experiencing a specific emotion at a specific time, at a specific intensity. That's profound. That is absolutely profound, right? And the reason you could do this is, I believe, the reason you could do this today is because of what Gary Gygax accomplished. By creating Dungeons and Dragons as a remove. Dungeons and Dragons is real life at a remove, okay? And that remove is valuable for many, many things. It's incredibly valuable, right? This thing of a remove is so important, right? I'll give you an example. Right now, you will not find an ounce of truth, in my humble opinion, on any mainstream news source. But if you go to Hollywood, you'll find nothing but truth packed into their movies. They'll say things that no news source could ever say about the real world. Like, here's a good example. Ask a major news source, what are the villain nations? They won't give you an answer. But in the movie The Union by Mark Wahlberg, they listed them out. They're like, these are the villain nations of the world. Let's just list them right out. Like, these are the bad guys. Like, just made the list. Just like listed it out. Could never get any news source to do that. But they'll put it right in a movie, right? It's the value of a remove, right? So, it would be dangerous to try to evoke emotions in ourselves directly, right? But Gary Gygax built Dungeons and Dragons not as a game, in my humble opinion, but as a human improvement engine. And part of that human improvement engine was the ability to have this remove, to have the player characters feel emotions, right? To have the player characters become emotional vessels. And basically any emotion that the player feels is going to be fragmented or fractioned. Actually, I would say fractioned. It's going to be fractioned. You're never going to be, like, the player character is going to protect you from 50 to 90% of the impact of feeling an emotion raw, right? So basically, once you understand what B. Dave Walters is saying, it completely changes the relationship between the player and the player character. It makes the player character an emotional vessel and an emotional shield. Actually, yeah. Emotion gets poured into the player character, and then some of it is always retained within the player character, so that the player never receives all of it at once. And this means that people could do exactly what I said. They could go into a Dungeons & Dragons game saying, I want to experience a range of emotions, or I want to experience a specific emotion, and I want to experience it at this intensity. And they can achieve that. And that's profound. That is, there's nothing in the world that does this. Nothing, right? Like, nothing that does this in the world as mechanically, directly, and effectively as Dungeons and Dragons specifically with a tabletop role-playing game experience, with a tabletop role-playing experience, not a game. So I really think we need to really be thinking extremely carefully about the ramifications of what B. Dave Walters has said, right? And also, I think we really need to be ready to be on the front lines of this emotional revolution, in my humble opinion. Every single word you just heard is my humble opinion. The important part is when I get to hear your humble opinion. When you get in the comments and send your traffic, please consider like subscribing and have a fetch millennium.